leading and building a business, the highs are so high and the lows are so low. And sort of the variance is just much broader than it is when if something doesn't go right, the lights can go off, right? And so I will say that piece of it, the amount of ownership that I have over the outcome has really been very motivating to me. I will say one of my strengths that I've had to learn and realize over the past several years is I'm a very creative problem solver. I don't just see A to B to C. I see, maybe we go to A and then D and then to C. And I think as I think about what's next, at any time period, I want to make sure that I'm able to exercise that creativity, have that ownership that's so important to me, and retain autonomy in how I get to the shared goals, even if they're defined by someone else.
Welcome to Leadership on New Terms, a show with leaders renegotiating the terms of work while AI rewrites the work itself. I'm Caroline Fairchild, and I am so excited to be joined here today with Jordan Taylor. She's the co-founder and CEO of Medley, a group coaching platform that develops leadership development programs for enterprises. Jordan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Caroline. I'm excited for this conversation.
I've been tracking Medley's progress for a while now. I'm so excited to dive in and hear more about the business that you're building. Let's start with your decision to build the company in the first place. You got out of HBS. That was after spending some time at BCG and the media company Mic. What made you want to build something rather than doing what probably a lot of people expected you to do, which is go back to a big company?
Yeah, it was a really tough decision. A lot of my peers were going into, back into consulting or back into larger organizations. And for me, I think the biggest thing that was most energizing and exciting was the opportunity to really have ownership in creating something. I started my career, as you mentioned, in consulting. I was at BCG. I loved the problem solving, working with smart people, but at the end of the day, we were consulting, not necessarily owning the outcome of the work that we were doing. And then when I joined Mic, which was a digital media company, I got a taste for what sort of ownership was like, being able to create something, move quickly, see what happens, own the consequences were things that were attractive to me. And so I will say, as I was graduating, I definitely did not recognize or appreciate just how much of a journey entrepreneurship really would be. But I think it was that blind desire to experience really creating something new and owning it end to end that had me take the leap. And it was kind of like, if not now, when? It's only going to get harder.
Yeah, a previous guest of this show told me that she's glad she didn't know what she didn't know because she probably wouldn't have started her business in the first place. So it sounds like you have some stories like that for us as well. Was there a specific moment when you realized that you wanted to found a company, or was it more of a slow realization?
I'd say it was more of a slow realization, but the idea for Medley was more of a moment, I would say. I actually took a leadership development course my last semester at Harvard Business School that took place in groups of 6 people. And you spent 2 hours with your group every week, and it was completely transformative. It changed how I thought about my own learning, but also how I thought about other people and recognized how different people's journeys are and can be. And that really sparked the insight of, is there something here? Could more people benefit from this type of experience? Because at the time, those types of really structured coaching and group-based learning were pretty limited to a small set of executives or people who are at a business school. And so that sort of sparked the seed. And then I think what helped me take the plunge was actually I was telling my mother, who ended up being my co-founder, about the business. And she and I are very close. We've always been very close. And I'd been telling her on the phone, I think there's something in groups. I don't know what it is. I'm very curious about it. And she called me back after one of those conversations and she said, Jordan, I think we should build Medley together. I know there's something here. And she had spent, 30 years in financial services, including 10 years running HR at Goldman Sachs. And she sort of saw from the organizational perspective how there was an opportunity there too. So that kind of helped catalyze our initial momentum.
Listen, if Edith Cooper told me that I had a good idea, I'd probably do it as well. And she's not even my mother. So yes, that's the interesting thing about Medley is that you co-founded it with your mother. She is co-founder and chair. You were CEO. How do you divide responsibilities?
So that's evolved a lot over time. At the very beginning, it was the two of us in a tiny WeWork office in Midtown. And it was very much, okay, what is the business going to be? And we didn't have as clear roles. We did a line up front that I would be the CEO and I would be really running and operating the company. which was a fun sort of flip of the switch, given, the mother-daughter dynamic that we do have as well. But now, I think the biggest thing that's been important for us dividing responsibilities has been really clear communication and trust in our relationship. So right now, I'm operating the business. I'm CEO. This is my 100%, 150% project, business rather. Whereas Edith really is, contributing her thought leadership. She's engaging with our highest level sort of senior clients. She's, staying close to, of course, the market and how we can really position ourselves and contributing to thought leadership there too.
Because what this really gets down to, Jordan, is scope, right? So when you talk about what really helps is just clear communication, what does that look like in practice? Anything that's really worked that you think that our listeners could benefit from?
Absolutely. I think the communication that's needed can shift depending on the role and the scope, exactly as you're describing. So what this looks like for us is we have a pretty structured weekly meeting where we are going through priorities for the week, any sort of strategic thinking that either one of us has or has had over the previous week. So what communication looks like for us is a very structured weekly meeting and then one other touch point later in the week. But we have open lines of communication throughout. So tactically, we talk every day, if not a couple of times a day. It might be something small. I try to keep her sort of in the flow of the things that are going on. What we found, though, is having some structured time where we're taking a little bit of a step back, looking at the previous week, looking at the previous month or quarter, depending on when it is in the cycle, and really being transparent with each other on where we are towards our goals, what we need to problem solve, and how we might be able to sort of push forward or address the highest needs.
Any big disagreements that have happened? And how did you address them?
Yeah, I would say we've had a couple of disagreements around people. So building a business, and even I would just say working in business, finding the right people and setting them up for success and putting them in the right roles, I think is the hardest part. And early on, we had a couple of different reads on people. I will say something that I value in terms of our partnership is it's not Jordan always does X and it's sort of whatever she says goes. There was a call where she had a strong point of view on someone. We ended up hiring them and they were a fantastic hire. And I think what we try to do is when there is a disagreement, we do lean into each other's sort of zone of expertise, whoever's either closest or has more experience or related to the topic. And that's served us pretty well.
One of the biggest decisions that you've made with the business is transferring Medley from an individual paying model to an enterprise B2B model. Walk us through that decision. Why did you make it and why did you walk away from the original model?
For us, working with companies was always something that we thought could be exciting and interesting, just given Edith, my co-founder's background. But it was something that when we started was really, further off in the horizon. We actually had a vision for Medley to be an in-person direct-to-consumer coaching community. We're planning to launch in April of 2020, which is, the absolute worst possible time to launch any kind of in-person business, let alone a business that brings people together in small groups. So when that happened, we pivoted the business to be fully virtual. We were still sticking with that sort of consumer instinct. And we did that for about a year and a half. And I will say, the switch that we made eventually to enterprise was a result of market demand and market pull. But what has really served us in our journey was that having that time period where individuals were giving us their money to learn with us really helped us create a differentiated experience. We were able to test and develop this proprietary matching algorithm that now powers our ability to deliver sort of scaled cohorts of 500 or 1,000 employees. And we refined sort of the coach skill set, all the inputs that are really needed to deliver this at high quality. And so at the point where we actually got some companies inbound saying, hey, my employee attended this thing and participated in Medley. They've had this great experience. Could you do this for us? We already had built out the model and it was de-risked from an execution standpoint. And so It's been 3.5 years now since we've been, serving enterprise customers exclusively. And that's been fantastic and very rewarding as well, because the scale that we're able to do that is just greater than we were able to from a D2C standpoint.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the scale. You've capped Medley at 7 to, I think, 10 clients a year, and you told me that you'd see it as a failure if you grew faster than that. That's very counter to, the venture capital, grow fast, scale fast mentality that we see with a lot of startups. So why do you have that perspective?
For two reasons. Firstly, we are still managing to grow with our clients. So instead of us focusing on signing 10, 15 clients every single year, what we are seeing is we're delivering so much impact with our partners that they're expanding with us and we're growing with them. And that's been advantageous for several reasons. I would say, firstly, so much of what we do is integrated into the context of our customers. It's not just, okay, you have a subscription to this thing and you roll it out to 10,000 people and, we sort of leave it at that. It's much more integrated into the culture, the leadership values, the principles, competencies that we're trying to actually action on. And so we see actual benefit from being able to expand within instead of, having some adaptation. And then I would say the other thing that has been sort of unique about our journey, we've raised venture, we raised from A16Z, one of the top firms. We did a seed round with them maybe 5 years ago now. But we also had the experience of almost running out of money while trying to raise our Series A. So we went out to raise our Series A round in another sort of less than ideal timing situation. March of 2023. SVB Bank collapsed in March of 2023, just as our process was taking off. I was feeling great. I had multiple firms in deep diligence. I was like, we're going to do this. They see the enterprise potential. We're going to invest in sales and the platform and the marketing. I mean, the venture world went silent for a month or so and then started to slowly pick back up momentum. And we had to figure out other options. We had to figure out how we could operate sort of more sustainably than we had been before. And that's also been a piece of sort of our growth strategy is, we don't want to spend millions of dollars on marketing in a year when, we know that there's an alternative path of us growing a little more slowly, but, being a lot more sustainable. The brink of profitability. It's just been a different shift. And I have to say that's been a real silver lining of that whole process, because that was certainly a challenging couple months.
Certainly a challenge. But Jordan, what I think is so interesting is that if we think back to the pandemic, the founders that made it, they had to be resilient. They had to have some quality that got them through that time. When you think about you as a leader going through that tumultuous fundraising round during such a crazy time, both in the venture world and in the world itself, what got you through it? What personality trait do you think helped?
I will just say I'm very determined. And so is Edith. We're very determined people. I think I have always admired that in her and in both my parents. And I didn't really embrace or consider a possibility that it wasn't going to work, that we weren't going to figure it out. And, some people might say this sort of determination is stubbornness. I've maybe have been called that before, but I have to say, Medley in general has taught me so much. This experience of building a company has taught me so much, but confidence in myself that I can, not alone, because I think nothing happens in my life in isolation, but I can, with others, get through really challenging things. It's pretty empowering. It's pretty exciting. And especially in the moment that we're in now, where there's so much change. And I hope we can talk about that in a bit, right? I have a lot of comfort that I can be thrown a wrench and then be thrown another wrench and figure out how to get through the situation.
There are a lot of wrenches that we could talk about. Maybe the first one could be AI. You've talked about how AI is going to restructure workforces. Edith also just published an article yesterday that I'll link in the show comments for those who want to read it later about her thoughts on AI. I thought it was brilliant. What's top of mind for you as you think about your offering, how you're working with your clients, but also personally as a leader?
I'm choosing to sit in the space of feeling energized around the potential opportunity while wanting to also be mindful of the risks and try to take somewhat of a balanced approach. I will say, coaching more generally is going to and is undergoing a lot of disruption. People are using Claude or ChatGPT as their coach for some sort of coach-like purposes and functions. There are a lot of incredible coaching platforms that have coaching bots that are available for individuals, for enterprises, tailored any which way. And at the same time, from my perspective, coaching serves a lot of functions. There's sort of the question asking, helping guide people function. There's the enabling people to practice or role play, and there's the sort of acting as a mirror. There's also the piece of sort of connection and empathy. And that's the area that I think is going to be really hard for an AI bot to disrupt for most people. And so much of what Medley does, and our sort of North Star to date, has been enabling people to learn with others and build relationship with others. And so from that standpoint, Medley does not have a coaching bot. We are very focused on maintaining our human-centric approach. Our clients are recognizing that that's going to be an important investment in parallel with AI skill set and tool set enablement and upskilling. And the outcomes that we see, which are really around greater connectivity, greater relationship building, more self-awareness and interpersonal skills in themselves, are going to be harder to replicate from a AI coach bot standpoint. And so we're kind of leaning into what we're great at, while also, making sure that we are as smart as possible on how AI is enabling our workflows and our sort of operational processes and our creation and things like that.
That exercise that you just outlined for us, thinking about Medley's business and what is uniquely human to it and you can lean into and offer, is I think something that a lot of workers need to be doing right now as well as AI infiltrates the workplace. What's unique to Jordan? What do you think is the thing about you that AI is not going to replace? And do you have any tips for people who are trying to think about that for themselves as well?
Someone said this to me recently and it really stuck with me. I have a unique ability to sit at multiple altitudes. I can paint a vision as big as the sky, as big as the world, but I can also zoom into little details. And that enables me to engage with different contexts, with different types of people and meet them where they are. I think that's something that I really pride myself on. I really pride myself on being able to connect with people and also connect the dots sort of in conversation and in a really generative way. And, I think another piece of sort of my broader leadership is I really do care. Like, I really care about my colleagues. I care about the outcomes of our work. I care about our clients. And I think people can feel that. And it's like quite intangible, but yet I think of our team, for example, we're a nimble team of 10 full-time folks. They told me they wouldn't be there if they didn't trust in my leadership, the trust that I really cared in what we were doing and what we were creating. And so, I have definitely had to do some reflecting and think through, okay, what's the role of a CEO now? What pieces of my workflow can I change? Would I never change? All of those types of things. But I would say, if I had to distill it, my ability to care for others, my ability to switch contexts. And then the third thing is the experiences that I've had previously enable me to have a level of judgment on the work that I'm working on that I think is really critical.
Absolutely. AI does not have the experience. They've never been in the room, if you will. So there's something there for sure. Jordan, the reason I started this series is that I was just noticing a pattern of senior leaders, a lot of them women, either going out on their own or restructuring the terms of their career, either in-house, creating new roles for themselves, or going out and going fractional, or perhaps going the creator route. Why do you think that is at this point in the economy? We have so many things happening. The labor market has been awful to women, particularly Black women at this point. And also, we have AI that's infiltrating, taking a lot of entry-level jobs. So why do you think a lot of women right now are just rethinking their relationship with work?
I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm also starting to see this amongst many of my peers. So I'm reading about it in articles. I'm, hearing from some clients who say that, they have retention challenges at certain levels with women. And then I'm seeing it people who I'm close to who have decided, that the old model isn't going to work for them. And I don't think there's one silver bullet answer. I will say after becoming a parent myself, it certainly accelerates the need for having a little more flexibility and having sort of more ownership over your career and where you want to spend your time. And, there's a lot of structural challenges to even just the reality that women are pregnant. They often have greater roles in terms of childcare, even some practical ones around breastfeeding or whatever that might be. And those things aren't going to change, but the support hasn't caught up or it's not there. it's really not. And it's really hard to appreciate how that's not there until you're kind of in that moment. And so I have to believe that that's been, I mean, it's a fact that is a big reason. And then I would say that the pandemic actually showed a lot of people that there was another option, that they didn't need to be commuting an hour and a half necessarily to go in person to an office, and that work from home, you and I are both in our home offices at the moment, is something that's possible. And so I think that's just one example of flexibility, but I do think there are more models of something different. And that's why I love the series that you're doing. It's so important for people to have other examples of what their career might be able to look like. And that's giving people more confidence and more courage that they can sort of be more creative in their careers.
Absolutely. And when we think about this series as well, I also like to talk to leaders about what gives them purpose in their career. Mm-hmm. Talked a little bit about how much you care and the people that you work with and your clients. What gives you purpose right now with Medley that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to get if you had gone back to BCG or had gone back to Mic or another large corporation?
I think it comes back to the level of ownership that I have and have had over this journey and over creating Medley over the past 7 years. I will say leading and building a business, the highs are so high and the lows are so low. And sort of the variance is just much broader than it is when if something doesn't go right, the lights can go off, right? And so I will say that piece of it, the amount of ownership that I have over the outcome has really been very motivating to me. It's been challenging because, I've also had to learn how to set boundaries and make sure that I'm not fully defined by Medley, and I get joy, which I do from a lot of other parts of my life. But I will say that's something that I really value.
Jordan, this has been such a great conversation. Before I let you go, I ask every guest, what's one term of your old full-time roles that you had in traditional corporate America that you would just never accept again?
One term that I would never accept again is having a predefined recipe for how to solve problems. I will say one of my strengths that I've had to learn and realize over the past several years is I'm a very creative problem solver. I don't just see A to B to C. I see, maybe we go to A and then D and then to C. And I think as I think about what's next, at any time period, I want to make sure that I'm able to exercise that creativity, have that ownership that's so important to me, and retain autonomy in how I get to the shared goals, even if they're defined by someone else.
That's great. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Caroline, for having me.
This is Leadership on New Terms. You can find us on LinkedIn, Substack, and actually now TikTok and Instagram. And we'll see you here next week.